much, Anja. I'm honored to be on stage with three prominent leaders. Astrid Hoem, the president of the Workers' Youth League, or AUF, in Norway, Norway's largest political youth organization, and the youth party of the Norwegian Labour Party. Rachid Khenissi is member of the board of Jusos Germany, the youth party of SPD, and a young European socialist, or YES bureau member. Rachid is also responsible for international affairs in the Federal Executive Board. We also have Siebe Jonckheere. He is the international secretary of the Young Socialists in Belgium, and as Rachid, a YES bureau member. I cannot think of a better time or a better way to start the second and last day of the ICAN Act on It Forum than with young leaders working across borders to abolish nuclear weapons. At the end of this session, we want to open for questions. So listen carefully, note down your questions, and please remember that they have to be very short. Astrid, Rachid, and Siebe, you all represent youth parties from nuclear complicit states. None which pose nuclear weapons themselves, but 2 states host US nuclear weapons on their soil. We all live in states, me included, supporting the retention, threat, and potential use of nuclear weapons on its behalf. These circumstances make it, in some aspects, our work for nuclear disarmament even harder, but also more important. Your work can be a game changer. I'll start with you, Astrid. In 2013, Norway took leadership for nuclear disarmament, paving the way for a new humanitarian narrative around nuclear weapons. Last year, Norway abstained from voting on resolutions on the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons in the UN. And Norway has not yet joined the TPNW. What is your and AUF's take on the situation? And what are you doing to change Norway's position?
Thank you, and thank you so much for inviting me to this Congress and to this meeting. I have to be honest, when I became a member of AUF, it was not nuclear weapons that was on the top of my head. It was climate change, and I thought, like, nuclear weapons, that's something my parents worked for or against. It was something during the Cold War, and I did not have a lot of engagement, and there was not a lot of engagement about it in AUF, because we thought that was kind of the past, now we're moving forward. And then I remembered the Labour Party government in 2013, who really worked hard to get that kind of game changer also in the nuclear weapon policies in the world. And we talked a lot about it. We were a lot of meetings with ICAN, and it also changed in AUF. We were really proud that our government did that, and we really wanted to push for it. And then you had 8 years with a conservative government who, even though I still want the government of today to do more, they did nothing. And when we came back to the government, it has been one of the most important topics for all of AUF's members to get the Labour Party to be a part of the Nuclear Weapon Treaty. And at the Labour Party Congress, which is where we decide all our policies every second year, the last couple of years, that has been one of our main demands to our mother party.
I mean, that deserves an applause.
And even though we are not there yet, that we have won at the Congress, we have shifted the policies. We have pushed the government to meet to the state party meetings, which I'm really proud of. And I think that's also symbolic. And we are going to keep pushing. And even though I can admit that it might be harder in the climate we have and the discussion of the world today. Even though it's hard, it's not impossible. And I know we have a lot of Labour Party members and even right in this here today who are working towards that. So I think there's not a question if we'll win, it's just a question of when.
Woohoo! Rachid, as Norway, Germany has not yet signed or ratified the TPNW. Germany hosts US nuclear weapons on German soil. At the same time, your Minister of Foreign Affairs often mentions the TPNW in positive terms. How do you see the case for nuclear disarmament in Germany these days? And what is Jusos doing to keep us all safe from nuclear weapons?
Yeah, as you mentioned, the debate in Germany is quite complicated since the shift last year when it comes to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Before that, the discussion was a bit mixed. We don't talk only about nuclear disarmament, we talk also about nuclear energy. And since a year ago, it went hand in hand that we don't want nuclear energy anymore. But a year ago, some of the government started to discuss about the nuclear energy, and it did come also with nuclear weapons and protecting themselves and trying to support it, but the government held against it. So the thing is that when it comes to nuclear disarmament, the users are against it. We are for no nukes anywhere, but as you said, we have US nuclear weapons, so we can't just say to our NATO partner, hey, just take off your weapons. But since a few years ago, since the new coalition, the traffic light coalition started, we even started looking at the TPNW. So there was a shift in the German side. So I see progress, and we are supporting this progress. And we users will keep fighting for it, that the discussion in NATO will develop, and that NATO as a security cooperationship can stay but has to develop, and that NATO won't be a nuclear cooperation anymore. So hopefully that in the future, in the near future, that NATO will be free of nuclear weapons. So it's a huge fight, but we are supporting it.
We will pick up on the NATO question later on, because you're all, we all come from NATO membership states. Siebe, as Germany, Belgium has not yet signed or ratified the TPNW, and it hosts US nuclear weapons on its soil. However, we have seen some changes or movement on the issue in Belgium. In 2020, a parliamentary motion to direct the government to withdraw US nuclear weapons from their soil or their territory was narrowly defeated. 66 parliamentarians voted in favor for that, and only 74 against. So it's quite close. How do you see the case for nuclear disarmament in Belgium? And how are the young socialists working for nuclear disarmament?
First of all, thank you for the invitation and the warm welcome. The case for the Young Socialists is quite the same as the two previous speakers said, and I'm very happy that I'm not the only one to say that this is not the first topic that pops into our mind when we start in youth politics. So I was afraid I was going to be the only one, but it's not the case. But I learned a lot since I became a member of the Young Socialists, and it has been a topic for a while, and it's also one of our action plans. There is a point in our actions that says we are against nuclear weapons. That should be obvious, that's without discussion. But it's not really easy to just say, okay, we go for nuclear disarmament without having a discussion about the bigger security infrastructure of the EU in the moment. And I'm speaking as being from Belgium, the heart of the European Union, and it's very difficult to start talking about nuclear weapons and not talk about our security infrastructure, given the context of the Ukrainian war. And I'm also talking about NATO, but I heard we'll come back to that later. Yesterday I had a call with someone from my party who is very active on the topic, and he said, yes, there are no pacifists anymore in our party. And I said, no, there are a lot of pacifists, but nuclear disarmament is a goal. It's not the tool. The tools to reach nuclear disarmament are part of a much broader discussion. In my opinion, today, the geopolitical context and the war in Ukraine is actually a momentum to jump on that train and promote nuclear disarmament. And I think as long as we keep on talking about it, and as long as we put the right words into it, because it's a very difficult narrative, people don't lie awake of their nuclear weapons that are hosted on our soil. I think people lie awake of their energy bills, but that is partly our task as young politicians to talk about the aspects of which people don't lie awake of, and also our mother parties. The person I was talking about, a member of our party, he wrote a bill in parliament about killer robots. It's also not something that we know, but Belgium will not produce killer robots nor export them. So that's also a part of a broader discussion. It's not only about nuclear weapons, but it's about the whole arms industry, and Belgium has a huge arms industry. But we are taking baby steps, and we are in a federal government, our party, and it's not easy to promote that. You have, for example, in Belgium, the Communist Party, they can shout from the sideline, but you cannot change anything if you're not in government and take baby steps.
Thank you. I will now pick up on the NATO question a bit, since you both of you mentioned it and the security structure. The previous government in Norway, they had a review where they concluded, and I will cite it exactly: there is no conflict as regards legal obligations between the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and the North Atlantic Treaty. So they kind of stated that there's no legal obligation, so the question is political. And at the first meeting of states parties that Astrid mentioned earlier, Norway, Germany and Belgium were all observers. And we observed the meeting, even though it was a controversial topic in NATO. And we saw that by Norway saying that it wanted to observe, Germany and Belgium also joined. What is the value of working on nuclear disarmament across borders? And how can we utilize this? How do you utilize it as youth parties? Astrid.
I think it's really high, both that we can work together with the meeting at the states parties, and right now in the Nordic countries with the Social Democratic youths in Sweden, Denmark and Finland. We are also working on demands on a nuclear weapon-free Nordic. I'm really proud that the Labour Party and also the Labour Party youth, which I'm a part of, always have said and stated that Norway should be a nuclear-free zone. But I don't feel any more safe if they're going to get nuclear weapons across the border in Sweden or in Finland, so that the Social Democratic Youth parties can stand together and say, okay, if Finland and Sweden are going to go into NATO, we have to have a nuclear-free zone in all of the Nordic. So that's some part where you can work together, because the nuclear weapon question is not a country-by-country question, it's a whole world question. So there's a lot of working together on that.
Yeah. Any one of you want to add on to it?
Yeah, I totally agree with Astrid. The thing is that if one country still has nuclear weapons, we still have the threat of nuclear destruction of our environment and nuclear damage of our environment. So the goal is that as soon as possible, every country will leave nuclear weapons. In Germany, we see a progress when it comes to that. For example, ICAN had a petition for member of parliaments and regional parliaments, but also the national parliaments. And within the users, we have 49 members of parliament within our fraction. So a quarter of the fraction is in the age of 35 and below and part of users. And the most of them, and also the most of the SPD and the Green Party members did sign this petition, also someone who I'm working for. So we are lobbying in a really, like in a double strategy, lobbying for nuclear disarmament. On the one way, like within campaigns, but also within talks within our mother party, but also member of parliament. So this is the one job, or the most important thing that we have to do. And I think because now the topic, we see now that the Nordics trying to start an initiative about a nuclear-free zone. So I think we shouldn't do only the Nordic nuclear ban. We should do a European nuclear ban as soon as possible.
Yeah, I totally agree with what the previous speaker said. Looking from my perspective in the Young Socialist Belgium, building bridges with your partners in your own country sometimes feels as building bridges with partners in another country, because Belgium is very complex on an institutional level. But leaving that aside, I think we have a good partnership with the Young Greens. other young youth politicians, they are not so active on nuclear disarmament nor nuclear energy. It has also been mentioned. But our first task should be to reach out to our mother party, because they are actually the ones who are able to decide. And to build bridges internationally, again, I am speaking from a point of view of a small country of Belgium. We need to work together on every issue that is cross-border, not only nuclear disarmament. And I see partnerships with the Netherlands. I see partners in Germany, but also outside Europe. It's not only an isolated question. And then I come back to the broader geopolitical context. I think we should also reach out to other youth parties worldwide. It's about dialogue. You will not reach the goal of nuclear disarmament without extending the dialogue and keep the talks open with the rest of the world.
Yeah, I hope for more dialogue on nuclear disarmament between youth parties. I want to go back to the war in Ukraine that Rachid mentioned earlier. Yesterday we heard from Lisa, Gabriela, Florian and Francisca about how Russia's invasion of Ukraine has changed lives, societies, and the narrative on nuclear weapons. You are all in leading positions in times of unprecedented uncertainty, with war in Europe and Putin threatening with the use of nuclear weapons. You have young people looking to you up to you for answers. What is your message to the members of your parties in this situation? And how do you communicate around topics such as nuclear weapons to young people?
That's a very difficult question. How do we communicate about nuclear weapons with our members? Well, actually, at this point, we haven't communicated about nuclear weapons, but I think it's mentioned by the previous speaker. Was it the minister? He said it's taboo. We all know that it's there, but it's a taboo. So what I would plea for is that we need transparency. Transparency about, okay, there should be weapons, or there are weapons on our soil, but actually it's not officially confirmed because there is military secrecy around it. But I think people want to know the answer. And last week I read a report which says that there is absolute majority support, from public support, to disarm nuclear weapons and get them away from our soil. Actually, I didn't know that, but it should be obvious. So what we should communicate is, okay, we have nuclear weapons on our soil, we need to get rid of them, but it's a question about time, because we have the war in Ukraine. I don't say that we will use them in the war of Ukraine against Russia, but, and I don't want to say but, because it means that I am actually saying yes, but it's very important to also say that as a small country, in a small continent, in the European Union, with all different states, we have no single overarching security infrastructure. We all need to work together very slowly. But what if the threat becomes real and Russia doesn't stop at Ukraine? We have taken that mistake years ago. We should have already known that with the speech of Putin in 2007 in the Munich Security Conference, that there was something inherently wrong with our security infrastructure. And we didn't react on that. So it's actually we, the younger generation, who have to give answers for what the previous political generation did wrong, although wrong is easy to say from today's perspective. But we should have been aware of the real threat. And now today we are in a position that blocks every talk about nuclear disarmament. And that's just the momentum that we need to gain out of this taboo.
Astrid?
First of all, we need to do everything we can so Ukraine can win this war against and for their own sovereignty. But what I often think about, or if I'm really frustrated one day, I'm like, what really happened with the 90s politicians? Like, they have every possibility to make a stable peace. You had the Berlin fall, you had finish up with the Cold War, you had a disarmament around the world of nuclear weapons, you had the treaty on, I don't know the English word, but the other weapons, and everything was going the right way. And I think that a lot of politicians should listen to ICAN and against nuclear weapons movements much earlier, and how fast we should do it. because it's much more dangerous to sit in this kind of situation right now when you have nuclear weapons on both sides. And I think a lot of parents around in Norway, when you get a message that you should buy in different kind of things you need if you have a nuclear weapon kind of war, that really frightens a lot of people. And new members also in AUF came in, and now they, like me, talk about climate change, but also about nuclear weapons. And I think they're urgent to have disarmament are really there, and to stop and prevent that we can be in such a dangerous situation again for the whole world. I think there's no other way.
Yeah. Do you want to
Yes.
comment first?
As youth parties, we have, in comparison to our mother parties, one thing that helps us. We are young. So as young people, I think we should radicalize in our words to make the point that the clock is ticking and we have to act now. As it was said before, the nuclear threat is one of the biggest threats in the world. So if we talk about one of the biggest threats in the world, it is not really complicated. It should not be really complicated for young politicians to say what's wrong. We are not the ones who are responsible to make legislations. We are the ones who have to add pressure with the civil society, with people like ICAN, with other organizations, to put the pressure on the politicians for them to act now, and not in a year, or not in 2 years, or not in 10 years. We have to act as soon as possible. That's why we have to put the pressure on. As young leaders, we have to work together on a European and, as Siebe said, and also on an international level to create a movement with your support. And this is the only goal that we have. We are not the ones who, as I said, who are making the legislation. We shouldn't think as complicated as much. We should just make the pressure for the others to act as soon as possible.
I want to pick up on what Siebe said about. That's actually a topic that you are not communicating with your members about. Because here we have like a great audience with academics, diplomats, civil society that know a lot about nuclear weapons. And we need to shift how we talk about these weapons from like an abstract security policy topic to actually talk about humanitarian consequences on the ground. What are we going to do if we have a nuclear explosion? So, in order for you to be part of that change and make that change, what do you need from academics, NGOs, civil society, diplomats? How can they help you to have the arguments, and what do you need to communicate with your members and make this a topic within your party? Rachid.
Yeah, I can start. As both of my comrades said, the fight against nuclear weapons, or the fight for nuclear disarmament, wasn't in a top agenda to enter the users. For me, it was the fight against racism, and to open up rooms for people of color to join discussions like this, because political discussions tend to be very white and very privileged. And for me and for users, it's important because this topic about nuclear disarmament is kind of not new, but it wasn't in the agenda. For us, it's important from NGOs, from experts, from diplomats, to get the information, because at the end, we help to decide within the political system how decisions can be made. So we need information. We need the pressure too. We need the pressure to us, but also to the mother party. It won't help if we are the only one who talks within the government or with the mother parties that we have to act now. It is kind of a double strategy. If we put the pressure on, and the civil society and like coordinating the actions, it will be very hard for politicians and decision makers to not react and to not make decisions.
Yeah. And Astrid, to go back to the 90s, how can we kind of change so they actually see those possibilities also today? Because possibilities are still there. They are still there now.
Yeah, they are. I often say at our office that ICAN Norway is the best lobbyist in Norway. I think you're really good. so I thought about, like, what do we need? I think we get everything from you, from facts to pressure to advise, and I think that's really impressive. I think a lot of other organizations can learn a lot from ICAN. But I think what we need is to push the agenda higher on everyone's mind. I think it's a lot of getting it out in the media. 2 weeks ago, I was in Finland with the other social democratic youth parties of the Nordic countries. It was really hard to get out our demand on nuclear weapon-free Nordic. And I think that's quite strange, because if we call the newspapers and says, hey, I have some suggestions about the rules that you have to be 10% at school in Norway, you always get something on in the newspapers. But with nuclear weapons, they're like, why is it relevant right now? We don't understand the questions. So I think it's pushing it out in the newspapers so more people also can read about it, and also to find some kind of hope, because I think in the time of area we're living right now, it's easy to feel like there's no reason to engage in politics. It's decided by someone else. Like, we didn't decide that Putin went to war in Ukraine. We didn't decide this. We didn't decide that. And you feel kind of like frustrated. What can I do? So to get the hope out that there's actually someone also working on nuclear disarmament, I think it's really important.
And things are happening.
Yeah.
It has happened the last years. Siebe.
I won't repeat what the previous speaker said, because I totally agree, and I think we should get along with these lines. But just to reassure the academics, politicians should listen more to academics.
Yes.
On every topic. I myself, I work in politics for the European Parliament, and I read a lot of papers. So to reassure all the academics that we don't read your papers, I do. Not yet about nuclear disarmament, but now it starts to be a topic of my concern as well. Thank you for this organization for enlightening me. But it's true. And also civil society organizations, not only academics, all of them together, working groups, listen to each other, talk with each other, dialogue, as I already said. Don't blame the politicians, don't blame the academics, it's just open the doors with each other.
So after this session, you all know where to find them or who they are. So just grab them and have a chat. Things are happening when it comes to nuclear disarmament. And I think it's a lot of hope in that, as Astrid also mentioned. But things are also happening on other areas in our societies. And I know that AUF have had quite a lot of wins lately, and probably you as well. And I think that we in the nuclear disarmament movement can learn a lot from other topics and other areas. So can you give an example of something from the youth party you represent that has worked and where you have succeeded? And if there's anything from that win that you think that we can learn from and use in our movement?
Start. A couple of years ago, we won at a congress at the Labour Party that we were not opening Lofoten, Vesterålen and Senja, which is some big areas in the northern Norway for oil drilling. And that was a really big win and had been a fight for many years. And I think what was most important about that fight was that we never surrendered. We were like keeping the fight every Congress and a bit more vote every Congress for about 10 years. Like my first Congress, it was a topic, and until like a couple of years ago. And also I think it's always the grassroots movements, also inside the parties. For us, it was working with the local branches of the Labour Party, not so much listening to anyone who said that it was impossible at the top, just listening to everyone around who went to the meetings in the Labour Party in the local branches. But my main advice is to never give up. I think anything is possible to win, but you have to have the stamina, because it's often not an easy win in 1 year, as you know, but in the end, I think we are going to get there.
Rachid.
We had recently 2 huge fights, and I can't decide which one, so I'll briefly do both. The first fight was about the minimum wage in Germany. It was too low. It is now, from the perspective of inflation, now again too low. But we fought for the minimum wage for 12 euros, really long and hard. And the government passed it when our party became the biggest party in the Bundestag, in the national parliament. And the second fight was recently about because of the inflation, we had discussions about reducing the ticket prices. and we users actually, it is like not known too much, but we users had the idea about the €9 ticket in Germany, and we passed it for 3 months, but it was our idea, and we had some fights, and then we had the €9 ticket, and now the €49, it will be €49 in the beginning of May, but it is a shift in thinking how to travel within Germany. Ticket prices, for example, in my hometown in Frankfurt were €80 per month or €85 per month, and you see a huge reduction when it comes to transportation. And this is actually, in times of inflation, a really, really huge fight that we had to fight, and we users are really proud of it.
Thank you. As you see, these people manage things. So now I will soon open up for questions. Think carefully about what you ask for.
Trying to
Siebe. Wins. Do you have any wins?
Okay. I thought we already moved to the questions, but okay. Do we have wins? Well, first I want to tell an example from the past. In the 80s, when we had the huge protests against Reagan and the nuclear armament, the race for more armament in Brussels, our party actually won the elections because of that narrative. So you can wonder why we don't do that today. Of course, the context is totally different. No Cold War. Well, there's a Cold War with China, and there are more actors. It's more complex than that. And also, our youth party was very important in that aspect, in these protests. But I'm very glad for Rachid that you have very successful campaigns about train tickets. I don't know if there are any Belgians here, but our train tickets are way too expensive. Maybe you should start a campaign on that. But we have reached quick wins on unpaid internships. Very niche, but it's also very complex to reach something in Belgium on that topic. But we're taking baby steps, and we should see some progress in banning unpaid internships. And we also did the first housing crisis protest in Belgium, because we have a very huge housing crisis. Rents are too high, I think everywhere in Europe, but the situation in Belgium is very complex, and we actually made it to the news. Our party is actually more profiling on the housing crisis, housing first topics, so more wins to gain in the future, I hope.
I think these successes show us that we need a change in narrative. You all mentioned that was one of the ingredients. And I will remember this: not listen to those who say it's impossible on the top. I think I can also sign on that. That's an important learning. Are there any questions? I cannot see that well, but Isaac will help me.
Yeah, I have a question.
So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. My name is Anne Marte. Thank you so much. So inspiring to listen to you. I just wanted to ask you more about like climate change and nuclear weapons, because it is very different issues, but it's also very similar because they are existential threats that need to be solved. And I just wondered if you have any thoughts, like from your view, for example, what could the movements, the climate movement and the disarmament movement learn from each other? If you have any thoughts about that?
Rachid.
I think, actually, that those movements should join into one movement. Because, as I said previously, those are the two biggest humanitarian threats. There is nothing else that could kill more people than the climate catastrophe and a catastrophe when it comes to usage of nuclear power. So if they join, I think there will be, the pressure will be so high that we should react. The climate ministry in Germany showed a paper that for Germany alone, the climate catastrophe till 2040 will cost nearly €1 billion. If we don't invest now, and if we don't talk about usage of nuclear power now, like both of them, who will pay the money? Me? My generation? Thank you, please no.
Do anyone of you want to comment? Or we can take more questions. Then we take more questions. There in the back, and then afterwards here in front in the red shirt.
Hello, my name's Anne. I'm from Conscience and Conscience Peace Tax International. And I think there's a lot of cognitive dissonance in this room because everyone in this room is against the bomb, and I'm sure most of us are against war. But we are all paying for it. We are obliged to pay for it. We have no options. If we're working men, we pay our tax, we pay for it. What are you people doing in your governments? What could you young politicians do for constitutional reform to give us the right to put our taxes, it is paying for the bomb, into non-violent solution of conflict funds? The whole world is obliged that we are all wage slaves to the defense cartels. And until we take away their money, they will keep on making this stuff. So I don't want to pay for it, but I don't have the power to change the laws. Constitutional reform is what I'm asking for.
Thank you. We will take 2 more questions. So the 2 last one. There's one in the front here with the red shirt. Isak, you will get the microphone from the back.
Hello, my name is Alf Harbis and I come from Tromsø. NATO has a first use doctrine, saying that they don't promise that they will not be the first to use nuclear weapons. And the rationale for this was the idea that Russia was so superior conventionally that in order to deter them from attacking with conventional weapons was that they shouldn't know if they could be met with nuclear weapons. This was many years ago. After the war in Ukraine, this is not longer rational. So in my opinion, this is a very, very important task that you could raise to the politicians. It's simple, it can be done in a hurry, it's not a long-term thing. What should they risk? What should NATO risk by changing the doctrine to promise that they will never be the first to use nuclear weapons? And there are 2 good arguments for this also.
You've already asked your question. So also the other get the time to ask questions. Very fast, very fast.
Very fast. Arguments. 1, it will decrease the probability that Russia will apply nuclear weapons to Ukraine. And 2, it will be very interesting to see how Russia reacts on such a measure. So my question is, do you agree?
Thank you very much. One more.
I don't agree with her.
Yeah. My name is Toynel, and I have a question to the German guy. I read on the internet, the German parliament decided for 10 years ago that they should get rid of the American nuclear weapon. Why have you not done it? Get it out. That is a decision in the parliament. That's the first question. Second things I heard, you speak about we had to win the Ukraine war. Why do not politicians listen to the leader of the Norwegian military, Erik Kristoffer, said the classic but nobody will win this war. I have the question to you two, all of you in the panel. Why do you not try to accept and get China to do the negotiations so we can get rid of this crazy war, so kill so many people in Ukraine now, or Russia, etc., etc.? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. We've got a question about the peace tax, first use, and why Germany still have US nuclear weapons on their soil. Siebe, you want to answer?
I actually want to combine both the first and the last question. I will not speak on behalf of Germany. I think you need to represent Germany. But there are 2 things you said about cognitive dissonance. I agree, but I believe we're all paying for the war. That's true. But I think the problem is that we, the people, are paying for the war, but we need to tax the rich. They need to pay for the war, not us who are working, going to work every day. That's completely true. I think that's what you meant, but disagree if you disagree. But I also think that today, someone has to pay for the crisis or the war in Ukraine. Of course, that's true. We're all paying a huge price, but I think on the future, that's a price we need to pay. Because if we want Ukraine to not get overridden by Russia, then we have to put pressure on sanctions. But that's what we're doing. And indeed, someone has to pay, not us, but we need to tax the big companies, oil companies, and whatever. And that also goes for climate change. But I think it's a bit, it's very complex to just say, tax this and,
Astrid.
If I understood the first question correct, is that you can kind of have take your own tax money and says it won't go into, for instance, weapons and war. I have to be honest, even though I'm very pro disarmament and de-escalation, I don't think that's the solution. And that's because I don't think with tax money that's the solution for anything. Like, I support abortion clinics. A lot of the most conservative in the conservative Christian party don't. If they say, I don't want my tax money to be used to that, where will that get us? I think that's the tax system of the welfare states has to be, it's not the part where you kind of push through the policies, it's in the voting rights. And you said that you don't have that much, what's it called, power into the politics. I believe that people have a lot of power into the politics, but we have to use it more when we vote. We have to do as you do, going to the parliament, lobbying, using our voices. But I don't believe it's the differences in that we can decide where the taxes goes to, because I think the far right many times will use that for arguments that I don't support. And to the last questions about the war in Ukraine, because I think German could answer the German question. No, the first use. Sorry, the first use. I agree with you, but I think the most important part still is the nuclear treaty ban, which we work most on, and I think that's take a lot of capacity. So that will be also a main ban still. And to the last question, I agree that nobody wins in a war, but I believe that if you are going to negotiate, the Ukrainians also have to have a stronger hold when you get to the negotiation. So I strongly support that we give weapons to Ukraine and that we support the Ukrainian war in every aspect we can, and also with human aid, because I think the war is a threat to all of the kind of rights that we have built up together in the world after the Second World War and the Cold War. And I think it's going to be a day when there will be negotiations, but then Russia can't have the stronghold.
I totally agree with Astrid when it comes to the tax system. I think policies should be changed, and you should vote parties that vote in favor for your policies. And there are parties who are campaigning for the issues that you and we talked about. About the German question, because everyone was referred to it. Yeah, Germany has nuclear weapon, not owning it. It is a US nuclear weapon because of the NATO stuff. Do I agree with it? Am I happy with it? No. As I said before, we should develop NATO into a non-nuclear cooperation so we can get rid of those weapons also on German soil. So I'm for it, and I'm campaigning for it, and I'm trying to get rid of them too. So I'm basically on your side. When it comes to Ukraine, I'm actually not on your side. I say Ukraine has to win the war, because who am I sitting at night with a glass of wine on my sofa to decide who's gonna win and who's not gonna win? I think the state of Ukraine has a right to defend itself. And that's why we have to pressure Russia into negotiations. And how are we doing it? As Astrid said, we have to keep Ukraine strong. If Russia sees that they have no chance, then Ukraine is winning. So that's why I'm not agreeing totally with you. But
I will open up for one more question that I've seen there. But before, I will just comment on that, saying that I think we are many in this room supporting Ukraine. And I think what's the strength of this movement is also that we managed to put some of our disagreements aside, yes, and work together to abolish nuclear weapons. And that's a powerful, powerful strength that I think it's super important that we also keep. Because on the Ukrainian war, when it comes to arming Ukraine, I'm sure there's different opinions in the audience. And I'm sure we are many that also agree with you too. So a last question there. Yeah, you will get the mic from Isak, I think. Then we can take both of them. Okay. But they have to be short.
Yes, my name is Emma. I'm the operations coordinator for U4TPW, but I'm also a Swedish socialist. As at least you, Astrid, know, the SSU is has not worked with nuclear weapons yet, but they are starting to get interested. I was just wondering, how do you approach the question of nuclear disarmament with these youth parties for everyone can answer what they think is best?
Then on there.
My name is Margareta. I'm from Oslo. My question is, we had some military from NATO exercises in Norway recently, and then we heard that there were nuclear weapons in ships laying in harbors along the Norwegian coast in the north. So I'm skeptical that Norway not have nuclear weapons, or are hosts as German, but not in the same scale. Maybe this is increasing. So my question is, do you know anything more about this? This must be more talked about.
Thank you. Who wants to start to answer? Astrid.
I can start first with a question about youth parties. I think there's a difference in how much you have worked with nuclear weapons from country to country. And as I said, in my early days in AUF, we haven't worked that much with it. But at the same time, it's kind of in the DNA of AUFs, because we've had these nuclear weapon fights against the mother party since the 50s. But what we do is we talk a lot about it when we meet also new people interested in it from the other socialist party, like meeting these guys here today. And we are also pushing with in our Nordic Social Democratic Youth Group and in the UC, which is our international Social Democratic Youth Group, to also push policies. And I think there's different kind of aiming into it. Some of it can be the nuclear weapon-free Nordic, which we have cooperated with now. Other things could be getting more social democratic youth parties to push for signing the nuclear ban, because we know that it's also easier for Norway if more countries like Sweden or Germany sign the same. I think Norway are afraid to be the first, but if they know it's going to be even more countries doing it, then it's a possibility, and then we have to work international. And to the other question, I don't know anything about it, but for me it's really important that Norway is a nuclear-free zone. So if that comes out to be true, I think that we need to have a political debate about that, because I mean that we should not have nuclear weapons housing from the Americans or from any other. We should not have nuclear weapons in boats at our shores, and that is a principle we have to really be clear about. So if that's true, then we need to have a big political discussion about it and be really clear.
We have
need your help.
I think it's like Norway, the official position is that we do not have, like, ships with nuclear weapons are not allowed to be at shore, but they also don't ask. They say that they trust that our allies keep the agreement. So that's the official policy. Rachid, do you want to answer the question?
Yes, I have a really practical example. I totally agree what Astrid said, but a really practical example, AUF, and was the sister organization that put nuclear weapons and the nuclear disarmament on our political agenda again. So it is really practical. There was a meeting a few months ago, and then we were like, oh, okay, we had a blind eye on it, and this is a really practical issue. So within our sister organizations, we have to lobby, and me and Siebe, for example, are also a part of the Young European Socialists. So I guess we have homework to do together in the next upcoming weeks and months. So maybe you'll hear soon from the European Umbrella Organization too that they have a really clear position when it comes to that.
You want to?
Yeah, I have nothing more to add, but I also want to highlight that I personally very much look up to the youth parties in the Baltic states, how they treat this narrative of nuclear disarmament, because you can be pro-nuclear disarmament and at the same time support Ukraine in the war against Russia. And they live with the constant threat of an invasion of a foreign power that lies to their border. So who are we to talk about feeling threatened as being safe in Germany and Belgium? So go talk with people from the Baltics, I would say.
Our time is up, but this panel have given me a lot of hope. I think it's quite absurd that today it's seen as responsible leadership to say that you are willing to mass murder civilians. But what this panel has showed us is that I think that already in the young generation, this is no longer seen as responsible leadership. And hopefully in some years, you are the ones leading our countries, signing and ratifying the TPNW, and getting rid of nuclear weapons.
Hope it happens before that.
Thank you so much. That's okay.
That was a good one.
That was a good one. Thank you so much.